I'm sorry. Thank you and good morning, everyone. Either this podium is really short or I've grown really tall overnight. Before arriving here, I wanted to read a little bit about the Jerusalem conference, even though I've been coming here every year and I know the audience. And I liked it when I saw on the website of the conference the following. It says that the Jerusalem conference has always been and will always be loyal to promoting the values of Israel as a modern, democratic and Jewish country. And I want to add another couple of words to this, which is my vision and Kadima's vision. 2 words that you will certainly have no opposition to. Also, a safe state in the land of Israel, and I think you should add it to your website as well. Now, since this is my vision and it's Kadima's vision, I would like to continue by asking a question, knowing that the group that we have here is a group of, well, I don't want to go into politics, but I know it is in a certain place on the political map, and therefore if we share the same vision, then why, when some of you look at me, you seem to believe that I don't share your vision, and why all those disputes in the Israeli society and Israeli politics seem to be so deep if we can all agree on the same vision. Now, this vision is required because, unfortunately, what used to be taken for granted, the establishment of Israel in 1948, a homeland for the Jews in the land of Israel even before 48, when establishing the state is a manifestation of the Zionist vision, but more so of the historic aspiration of the Jewish nation to come back to its land of origin, to its homeland. A country that, or state that wasn't established as a result of the Holocaust, but rather based on its historical right, and its legitimacy is not necessarily based on the UN Declaration in 47, but rather its historical right, and yet the UN Declaration gives its international legitimacy. This thing that used to be taken for granted is not taken for granted today, and if we talk about the vision, and not only talk about it, but rather make a few decisions to follow it, then we will find ourselves living here as different societies, living next to each other without any common denominator, without a common future or a common language, without similar education, and with major hostility towards each other, not just a difference of political opinions which are expressed in the voting for the Knesset, but also social hostility which will make it impossible for us to continue generating and working according to the Zionist vision. Now, I believe that probably throughout the discussions here, a lot of threats have been mentioned. The Iranian threat, the threat of delegitimization of Israel's existence, not just this physical existence, but also its existence as a national home for the Jews. And these are 2 threats that we must cope with and we must deal with. And by the way, there is no coalition and opposition there. Estimating the threat is something that we all do just as well. And Iran is a threat to Israel. The Iranian threat has nothing to do with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It takes advantage of it in order to promote their own radical Islamist ideology. It lives off the conflict, and the conflict feeds it, and it feeds it back. And their ability to do it has nothing to do with the existence of Israel as a leading modern democratic state, but rather because of its existence as a Jewish state, the only Jewish state, besides the fact that we are the only true democracy in the Middle East. And when we talk about the Goldstone report, we must realize that this is a combination of those 2 things, because it comes from a place, from a forum, from the Human Rights Council, which only promotes processes which are against Israel, almost only. And occasionally we all unite when we see things like Durban and Durban 2. Sometimes some of the other countries join us. But this process is problematic because it is not just a delegitimization, as I've said before, about the question of what the Jewish state is, but it's also the delegitimization of our ability to protect our own physical existence. Because what does the Goldstone report do? It puts spanners in the wheels of the legitimacy of Israel's defense of itself against terrorism. Terrorism which does not accept our existence here at all. We must remember that the war in Gaza was against Hamas. Hamas, which for 3 or even almost 4 years had been refusing to say that Israel has a right to exist. Not as a Jewish state, just physically. And therefore we have to cope against all these things. This is something that we have no dispute over, and certainly we have to do it together. But going back to the question of why do we have such deep rifts among us? Why do we have such deep divisions? It is because of the lack of willingness not only to talk about this vision that was proposed here before, but also to draw conclusions from it, conclusions at the decision level, at the action level, which, if we don't draw these conclusions, we will lose our ability to hold on to all those things which are important to you and to me. And I think that we should decide among ourselves, even with the disputes, that there's not a single person among us who cares less or more about these things. And if we talk about the future of Israel as, let's say, a democratic and Jewish state at this point in time, and since here the text of the Jewish state talks about preserving and enhancing Jewish values and Jewish tradition, there's something more than technical about this. Now there are 2 things that we need. First of all, part of this is having the technical issue of Jewish majority in order to prevent a collision between the democratic value and the Jewish value, because it's not just a matter of numbers, it's the ability to generate a character of the state which would be Jewish, something which is based and fixates those things which I believe are national matters that deal with Jewish heritage, tradition and character on the streets of this country, not only in Bnei Brak or Mea Shearim, but also in Tel Aviv, in the neighborhood that I live in. The decisions which are necessary belong to 2 domains. First is the understanding that in order to have a safe Jewish democratic country in the land of Israel, we need to have a Jewish majority exercising this sovereignty. And with the realistic view, there are 2 possibilities. Either we have a democratic state in Israel, or the other option, if we don't decide what it takes to have a Jewish democratic state, that will be a bigger state between the sea and the Jordan River, with the right to vote to all those who live in it, and that would be an Arab state, because it wouldn't be a binational state. A binational state is an illusion. That would be the result or the product of an agreement between 2 nations. But unless we agree to make the decisions which are required because we want to have a country which is both Jewish and democratic, this is what we're going to get. And this is something that I'm not willing to accept. I'm not willing to accept that, and what I'm worried about is that part of the public who cares about the Jewish side and wants to preserve Jewish values and care about the national values and are willing to fight for it, are fighting against about it against me on the political level without understanding. And they talk about those who want to give to the Palestinians, want to give to the Arabs and do favors to all kinds of people in the world, and we have to be strong against the President of the United States who dares say 2 nation states. Let's think about our own interest. Because I care about the existence of Israel as a Jewish country, because to me the raison d'etre of our existence here is to have Israel as a Jewish national home, understand what anyone who is honest with himself must understand, and that's the fact that the only solution for Jewish and democratic sovereignty is implementing the principle of 2 nation states with security, not in order to give someone anything, but rather to take for ourselves, not in order to do someone a favor, but rather to retain our Jewish sovereignty, not out of weakness, but rather out of the understanding that this is our way of preserving this national issue. And it is only when each of us goes home and talks to himself or thinks about this honestly and understand the default There is a high price to pay when you choose to do nothing, and there's a high price to pay if our nation will be unable to cope with a result that will be really will cause us to pay a very high price, a price which any leader will find it very difficult to pay. But only if we understand the price of not reaching an agreement, which would be losing everything you all believe in, only then will we be able to do things through a consensus. And if each of us understands that even the people representing my position or the position that I'm fighting for are doing it in order to preserve the nature and character of this state rather than doing someone a favor. And this is what we all should understand. Another decision is no less important. We have refrained from dealing with it, and politics is leading us to a place where we tend to lose something that I think the Jerusalem Conference is out to protect, and that's promoting the Jewish tradition and values. I believe that the raison d'etre of Israel is to be a Jewish state, because if we only retain our democratic identity or our democracy as a method or a value, or a system, that would amount to losing the entire Zionist principle, the rejoining of the nation and the territory, the nation that has been dreaming for thousands of years about coming back. But what does it mean, a Jewish state? Let us think about this one as well. Because if we ask people outside, if we just get three people and ask them what a Jewish state means to them, well, one will say it's a state governed by the halakha, using the halakha, the Jewish law, as the governing law of the state. And another will say Jewish state means Jewish majority. And a third one would say since Judaism is democratic, it's one and the same thing. And by the way, this is some of the Supreme Court decisions are like that. At a time when they had to decide, for example, if you remember the issue of the Bar Ilan Road, they didn't ask about the question of whether the Sabbath is a right unto itself, and I believe it is, but they just said we have to find a solution between the religious and the non-religious where they could drive and where they couldn't. And I'm asking about the Sabbath in itself. What about that value? And the fact that for many years the Supreme Court, the High Court for Justice, used to say that Judaism is democratic and therefore it's one and the same thing, is not a solution representing the manifestation of the Jewish state in our various levels of our lives, of all of our lives. Those who would say that the Jewish state, and by the way, these are things that I hear about new olim, new immigrants coming here. They all can come according to the right of the law of return, but some of them are non-Jewish, and they say, okay, so what's the difference? Okay, some of them convert to Judaism, but there are some non-religious people who say, what do you mean? They will be Jews. They'll go to the army and they'll speak Hebrew. That's what it means. Is this Judaism? To go to the army, which to me is something which is just part of the duty of every citizen in Israel, and should be duty of every citizen in Israel. Does that make you Jewish? It makes you a good citizen. It makes you someone who contributes to society and someone who protects their homeland, but it doesn't make you a Jew. And speaking Hebrew is also just one part of it. Now let's talk about the connection between Israel and the Jewish diaspora. Those two elements of speaking Hebrew and serving in the army are not things that connect us with the Jews who don't live here. And the thing that I'm talking about